2. Reid. Her screams had been answered when a janitor came running toward her with his phone pressed to his ear. He'd asked Reid questions about Grayson, which she'd answered. It was scary how much she knew about him. Her best friend, Melanie Scott, often told Reid she was far too intrusive into the life of a man who didn't want to be with her. Reid knew Melanie meant well, but it still always felt like a slap in the face. Now, her knowledge of Grayson's life would come in handy. After the ambulance arrived, the medics quickly took over. Grayson's eyes stared off into space, and his head lolled from side to side. Reid tried to stay in his line of vision, hoping to show him that she was still there. They loaded him onto a stretcher, and Reid followed them out of the recreation center. "Can I go with him?" she asked as she walked briskly next to Grayson, holding his hand. "Aren't you his wife?" The question gave her pause. Reid wanted to be, ever since they'd met. She'd fallen head over heels for him. The one night they'd spent together after their holiday party had only made her feelings for Grayson worse. She'd thought they'd start the new year off as a couple. Instead, they were still friends. Grayson kept Reid at an arm's length when it came to romance, and treated her like the best friend he couldn't live without. Reid couldn't or wouldn't live without him, either, and had resigned herself to thinking and feeling that he was worth it in some roundabout way. Besides, relationships were messy, especially with your best friend. At least that's what she told herself. If lying meant she could stay with him, then so be it. She nodded quickly. The ambulance ride was undoubtedly the longest, loudest, bumpiest, and scariest ride of her life. Reid held onto Grayson's hand and spoke to him, letting him know everything would be okay, even though she was certain her expression didn't match her words. She didn't want to think about how she'd thought he'd been faking what the medic called a myocardial infarction when he spoke into his radio. She knew that meant heart attack. But Grayson was young and fit. He worked out all the time. Only people with poor health had heart attacks. Not men like him. Not someone in his mid-30s with his entire life ahead of him. "We're almost there," she told him, even though she had no idea where they were going. There were multiple hospitals in the D.C. region, and she hadn't a clue which one they were closest to. "Everything's going to be okay." Grayson blinked. He lay with his shirt cut up the middle. It was one of his favorite ones, and he was going to be pissed when he found out it was now a tattered rag. Those sticky electrode patches were stuck to his chest and arms, with wires leading to a machine, and he wore an oxygen mask. Reid smiled and gripped his hand tighter as she looked into his eyes that lacked life and vibrancy. "What is wrong with him?" "Everything's going to be okay," she said again, more for herself than him. Her words were just that, words. She had no doubt that fear filled Grayson. She had to be the strong one, the one he looked to for comfort. Once she was alone, she'd have her breakdown. Until then, she'd smile and run her free hand through his hair,